Hey, good morning guys. Today we're going to go over 5 tips that I've learned over the years for router maintenance. So stick with us, we'll get right into it. Alright guys, so most of these you may have already dealt with, but this is really geared toward new people. But even those of you that have been around for a while, these may be some little things that you haven't thought of or haven't run across. So let's get into them. Alright guys, so the first out of the 5, and these aren't in any specific order, but the first one that I get a question, especially from new people, I get this question quite often, is what happens when your bit gets stuck in there? Let me show you. But what happens is, so you've got the shaft lock here. Now all I'm going to do is loosen that nut. So that is loose now. This is not one of the ones that has the double nut lock system, so that bit should come right out of there. But it doesn't want to come out of there. Why not? Why is that bit stuck? Do not do that. Don't ask me how I know. If you have too much blood in your body, you can do that. See that sawdust built up in there? That is a collet. So what happens is that collet gets shoved down in there when that nut gets tightened, and then it just doesn't want to let loose. So you want to be real careful when you do this. But what you need to do is, all you need to do is just knock that loose and that thing will come right out. That collet is getting stuck down in there and it's just kind of jammed up. It's got some sawdust in there. It's getting kind of jammed up and it just doesn't want to release. It's almost like hitting the jar on a jar of pickles. You just got to kind of bust it loose, but you don't want to hit, you definitely do not want to hit out here on the flute because you'll break that router bit. But all you got to do is just tap on it just like I did and it'll come right loose for you. So the second issue that I run into a lot, or I see a lot, is cleaning. So let me go over a couple things that you need to know when it comes to cleaning your router. So when it comes to cleaning these things, there's not a lot to do, you guys. This is a little battery operated, or actually it's a rechargeable little blower. It's made for cleaning keyboards and your computer and stuff, and I find it works really well for this. So what I want to do is, you saw that had sawdust and stuff in there. I just want to blow that out. Now I'm going to turn it around, and what happens is when this router is running, air and sawdust gets down in here. We want to keep that fairly clean too. So that is part of the cleaning process. Now, down in here, you can see inside this armature, you can see some stuff build up in there. Let me show you how I'm going to clean that out. Okay, so that residue in there on the inside of that armature, I've just got a little lacquer thinner here, and what I want to do is just kind of use that lacquer thinner, and that should loosen that stuff off, loosen that up. It's kind of caked on there pretty good because it's been quite a while since I did this. I was saving it for you guys, but you can see that is kind of dissolving that stuff there. So you just want to keep that real clean there. So that's another thing to do on a regular basis, is clean out the inside of the armatures. One extra tip that I didn't mention before, do this when it's unplugged. It's probably a smart thing to do. All right, that's that. And then blow the nut out and clean that as well, just to make sure that you're starting with all clean surfaces in there. All right, let's move on. All right, number 3, we've kind of started on that last scene, but number 3 is collet maintenance. So let's get into that. But this has a taper on it. That taper right there fits perfectly to the inside of that armature. Then when this nut is tightened down, this nut has a shoulder, when this nut is tightened down, it forces this collet in, and being as that split, that's what grips the router bit. That's actually how it works. So a lot of people don't realize that. So it's pretty easy once you understand the mechanics of how this works. Now, the one thing that again, Dad being a machinist taught me, is that the inside of this and this surface here need to have a good connection, and that's why it was stuck, because it was dry. So what you want to do, you can put it on the inside of there, but you can put it here too. Just a little bit of oil. This is just 3-in-1 oil. Just a little drop of 3-in-1 oil, just so that thing slides in there nice and smooth, and that you would think that would cause the router bit to loosen in there, but that's not the case at all. So keep a drop of oil every once in a while. You don't have to do it very often, just every once in a while, put a drop of oil on that. Be really careful when you put that nut on, you don't hit that edge there. And then just put your nut back on. And that will ensure that wherever you want that to be sticking out. Oh, by the way, these have marks on them, but you can, as long as you're in that far, you're good to go. And then you just tighten that nut down. Put your wrench on it, tighten it down. Now your collet is working exactly the way it's designed, and it'll keep that bit tight. So here's another issue that comes up a lot, especially with new people not knowing how these things work, and that's the brushes. So let's get into that. So we got 2 corded routers here. We'll talk about the cordless here in a minute, but 2 corded routers, and these are different in the way the brushes are. Now, if you don't know what a brush, this is not like a bristled brush. This is a brush that has to do with electric motors. So this has got a little cap on there, a brush motor. Again, make sure you're unplugged, guys. So this is the brush, and there's one on both sides. And this makes an electrical connection to the upper part of the armature, what they call the commutator on the armature. And it's real important, if these 2 brushes aren't making exact contact and making good contact, if you get sawdust in there or a little chip or something, your router will not run. That is really important that you have your brushes connected. That brush actually looked pretty good, so I'm not going to do anything on there. This is the easy access brush when you have routers that have a cap like that. Now, in comparison, this is the 611. This is my favorite router. This, you have to take this top cap off in order to get to those brushes. Okay, so once my screws are all out, now this thing will come right off. So the brushes now are right here. They're kind of behind this little spring-loaded coil. If your router stops running for whatever reason, the first thing I would check is the brushes. Now, once in a while, you'll get a piece of sawdust or a chip or something in there that will keep that brush from making a line or making connection with the top part of the armature. So if you're having issues and you need to replace those brushes, we actually have a video. We'll put the link in the description, a video of Dad actually replacing the brushes. It's a little more complicated than on the Makita that I was working. But the whole point is, once you get that to this point, then you can take your little blower and you can blow this thing out. And that may be a solution to your problem. It could be that your brushes are not making a good contact with that top part of the armature. So there you go. Okay, lastly, again, these aren't in any specific order, but lastly, I get questions of why can't I move my router up and down? That has to do with the housing and the motor. So let's get into that. So let's get into what I'm talking about on the motor and the housing. This is the housing, this is the motor. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is that in order to have nice adjustment, you've got to have a pretty good movement of this ring on the, and the Makita is a different system, but on this ring. So every once in a while, you want to just put some silicone on there. Or you can use oil, WD-40, whatever you want, just to make sure that that thing is moving around good. Again, then the other part is put some in here inside of the housing. This is the housing. The motor slides up and down inside that housing. So all you got to do is just keep that in there, and that will keep that thing in pretty good mechanism as far as going up and down. Now, the other thing that you have to take into account is this little clamping system. And that's what clamps the housing to the motor, keeps it from going up and down. Now, if you have a problem with the motor kind of slipping in and out of that housing, it could be too loose. Then what you do is this little Allen screw here, you just want to adjust that one way or the other. As you turn that, you can see the Allen screw here it either goes in or it backs out. As I turn that, you can see that's looser than it was. So, but it's still working fine. So if that's too tight, you can just back it off a little bit. In contrast, the Makita is a different system. It's a rack and pinion system. Still got the clamp kind of thing going on there, but it just goes in and out. So if you have some issues with that, you might check the rack and the pinion, make sure that that's all clean, all in good shape. And then as far as the clamping goes, let me open that back up. There's a nut right there, and you just get a little open-ended wrench, and you tighten or loosen that nut, and that's what keeps this rack and pinion, keeps this housing clamping good on this motor. It's just that simple. So now in closing, we want to talk a little bit about this brushless battery-powered router. So this doesn't have brushes in it. It says right on it, brushless. So there's no vents in the top to blow out like on the corded routers, but everything else is pretty much comparable from the clamping system to the Collet. Everything else is applicable. It's just those particular things. So your router may be a little bit different than these routers. I was using the Makita and the DeWalt, but you might have a Bosch or whatever. But everything that I've covered here pretty much will work with your routers. If you guys have specific questions on your routers, something you can't figure out, email me, eric@makeawoodsign.com. We appreciate you watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to subscribe. Click that little bell icon, and we'll see you on the next one, guys. Love you. Bye-bye.